everybody will be on the same page. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is a recording of, what day? I don't even know what day it is today. It's Wednesday, July 15th. And this is MED110 6DAX, Anatomy and Physiology. And what is due today, of course, are all week. What week is this? 7?
We're actually at week 8.
We're week 8, so every week 7 items are due today. So, and I'm going to give everyone a little bit, not really an extension, but I won't be looking for things until later tonight because you're, well, it's up right now, but you could be experiencing what we're experiencing on campus right now. So, and those of you who haven't went to laboratory, please look at the announcements and look for extra credit opportunities to make up for your lab. And those of you who did make appointment and come to lab, you signed in, you will get full credit for the laboratory. Okay, so watch out for that. So again, what's due today? By hopefully this afternoon, if you can get it to me. Task 7, discussion 7, lesson 7. Now this is week 8, topic 8. So we look. What are we looking at this week? Now, this is one of these topics that I have to talk to the curriculum committee about. Why do we put it all the way in the end when it should be in the beginning? Because this is what we're always talking about. We're always talking about homeostasis. And and the best thing to look at what we're talking about is in this video, but I can find the same picture. Let's find this picture. Now, when you look at homeostasis, I want you to think of it, think of your body like a thermostat. That's like the best way to look at it. And how does a thermostat work? Well, when you're looking at a thermostat, it's, what do you call that? Like when it gets hot, you know, you have to, first, there has to be some sort of imbalance, right? So the imbalance would be temperature. So let's say my thermostat senses that it's hot, it's summer. A change is detected by a receptor, right? And then the receptor, which is a sensor, is going to send messages going up, right? So these are ascending tracks. So in your spinal cord, these are the tracks or the nerves that are going up to the brain. And of course, the control center is your brain, okay? And then the brain's going to analyze and go, hey, it's hot. We got to do something about it. So then it's going to send a message, a descending tract to your effector to say, hey, let's change something. Let's effect a response, right? We can.
I'm sorry, Dr. Garais. May I interrupt you just 1 second? Are we repeating this song going on in the background?
Repeating what?
There's a music going on for some reason.
Okay, let me see. Let me see. Maybe it's because I'm on video. Say it again. All right, you hear me now?
Yep, I hear you perfectly fine. Thank you.
Okay. So that's an. So when you look at it, that's all your body does every second of your living day, right? There's some sort of imbalance. It detects an imbalance, and then the control center then sends a message to your descending fibers to affect some sort of change. That's all you do all day. So your brain has to be intact. Your nerves, ascending fibers and descending fibers. By the way, your ascending fibers are called the afferent pathway, and your descending fibers are called the efferent pathway. And again, if you have two things that look really alike, memorize one like your life depended on it. And I always remember effector. If I want to effect a change, that has to be motor. And this side has to be sensory, okay? So that's all that we're looking at, and that's all the examples we're looking at today. And one example is, okay, I'm sensing that I'm hot. So what happens? The output, the effector, your glands, your sweat glands will start releasing water to cool the temperature. You'll also start doing what? Turn on the air conditioner. You're going to do something, or you're going to get out of the sun. And then it will bring your homeostasis back into balance. Every single thing, and this should freak you out because every single system in your entire body does this on a millisecond to millisecond basis. And remember, what is health? Health is when homeostasis is always achieved and there's always a balance. When the human body can no longer affect any change to fix this, guess what we do as medical professionals? We play around with anatomy and physiology to affect that change. All right? So do you get the whole overview?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that we have that whole overview, let's now start applying it to some things. And if you watch these videos, that's all that it is. And now we're going to add another wrinkle in this. And this video is nice. Let me open up the video and get to that one part.
In this video, I will talk about
I should memorize when exactly. Buffering.
This might seem like common sense.
Well, not really. It isn't common
long
sense. Now,
can give you heat stroke or dehydration.
but now that you know, now that you see, you know, that big circle drawing that we just saw, now it makes total sense on why your body does what it does, right? Think of anything that your body does, right? And temperature control, right, is one of them. And that's why human beings, we must maintain a normal temperature and a normal range. And that normal range is homeostasis. So if too much or too little is always bad for the human body. And I'm trying to get to that picture. It's a really neat picture. I should really memorize. You know what? This is what I'm going to do. I am going to find the picture myself. And it's the same picture, but it has an add-on. Where is it? Because this is the one, this is the picture that we had, but I want to show you that how do you know that you're going too far? And that's the negative feedback loop. The negative feedback loop is when here we go. Here's an example. But I don't want to go. Do I want to start talking about? Okay. Here you go. Here's a more specific example about the homeostasis of temperature. We looked at it in a more simplistic view, but let's look at it in an exacting scientific view. So let's look at this. So remember, we have our ascending tracks, right? And that's our nervous system. That's our sensory. And then what happens, right? The nervous system does what? We find since the temperature is abnormal, so the nervous system signals blood vessels to dilate, right? And that's why when it gets a little warm, your blood pressure should temporarily drop a little bit, because the blood vessels will dilate so that the sweat glands can get water and then secrete. And then the body heat should drop. Now, how do we know that it's too much or too little? Well, the hypothalamus, which is a part of your brain, has this thing called a set point, right? And I believe I talked about set point when we also talked about, remember we talked about dieting and how if you diet too fast, you know, you could bounce back and gain even more weight than you originally wanted to lose. You know, like let's say you lose 10 pounds for the wedding, but then after the wedding, you go back to your old diet and then you'll gain 15. It's because of this set point. And the hypothalamus is the part of the brain that that monitors and that keeps your set point or, you know, the normal in the middle. And that's why dieting and any changes that you need to do to your body's chemistry and physiology has to be very small and incremental. Okay, like it's also the reason why you can't go to the gym and just run 5 miles, or you can't just run a marathon next weekend. You have to build up your body. Now, the same thing, what happens when the body temperature drops below normal? Nervous system do the exact opposite, right? The blood vessels start to constrict. You have a localized increase of blood pressure. Then the sweat glands will remain active, right? And what will happen? Another thing that will happen is you'll see your hair on your skin start standing up, and that cuts the wind resistance on your skin and decreases evaporation of any fluid from your skin, and then you'll start to shiver, and then that should bring your body temperature back to its set point at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, also known as 37 degrees Celsius. So you could see that there's either too much temperature or too little temperature, and you could see now the hypothalamus controls it. So now you can understand if there is a tumor of the hypothalamus, do you think my patient can control their temperature very well? No. And actually, that's the signs and symptoms of either a basal skull fracture or a cancer in a hypothalamus when my patient's temperature gets out of hand. And of course, temperature, we need to have it at the set point, because if you have a temperature greater than 103 degrees Fahrenheit, your brain's not going to like that, and then you're going to go into seizures. Never a good thing, right? And that's called a febrile seizure. We don't like those. But fever also has, when it's a low-grade fever, like 100, right? That's a good thing, because then any bacteria or viruses, they don't like that, and they tend to die that way. So you could see that there's a positive and negative reaction, and that negative, it goes, and you could see how your body is constantly trying to keep yourself in the middle. So let's look at the next part. The next example is glucose regulation, and that's really important to dieting. That's really important to and we also saw a little bit of the vascular system, but let's look at what happens to hormones and insulin and blood glucose levels. And let's look at our ebook at chapter 17.9. So let's go to our ebook. OpenStax. Cross my fingers, hope that it is cooperating. And table of contents, and then I'm going to go down to 17.9. I love things like this, eStacks. Don't have to pay for books. That's cool. Uh-oh. Now unit 3, nervous tissue. There, why is it not letting me go further? 14, 15, 16, come on. Endocrine, pancreas. So we already know about the pancreas. It secretes, remember when we cut up the, did we cut up a pig?
Yes.
Okay, good. Remember when we cut up the pig and, what's this? Why is this in my way? Maybe I sign up, continue reading for free. What's this clickbait? Come on, man. All right, let's just look at this way. So we look at the pancreas, right? Remember, it was closely associated, and your stomach is here somewhere, and it was closely associated with the first part of your small intestine, which is your duodenum. And the pancreas has a head and a tail, and it has alpha and beta cells, and these alpha and beta cells secrete insulin and glucagon. And let's now look at what insulin and glucagon do. We already know. I think it wants me to sign in. Is that what's going on? I'm an educator. I am a what? Instructor. Sorry about this thing. I usually am able to bypass this, but inbox. You know what? I don't have time to this. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach you another way, but look in your OpenStax and, just sign in and put your email and then they give you a code. But I haven't done that in a while. So let's look at homeostasis, endocrine, glucose. Let's look at some pictures. All righty. And some of this will sound familiar because we talked about it when we cut up the piggy, if you guys remember that. Okay. So of course our set point is around 90 milligrams per deciliter, and that's your normal glucose level fasting. That's your FBS or your fasting blood sugar. Anything beyond 103 milligrams per deciliter, ooh, that's no bueno. That's already some signs and symptoms of diabetes. Okay, but again, that's only screening. Your fasting blood glucose is only screening. Your definitive test for diabetes is your oral glucose tolerance test, which I'll talk to you at another time. So just like our chart before, we have to have a stimulus, right? So I ate this lovely cupcake. So what happened to my blood glucose levels? It should do what? Rise. So the beta cells in my pancreas, right, start releasing insulin into my blood. And we all know what insulin does. Insulin now opens up the cells so that sugar can go in. And then also liver will also take up any excess sugar that we don't readily need, and then it's going to store it as glycogen, right? So that's one of the important things. Remember when we cut up the piggy, I said, hey, the liver does more than just a filter. It has a very large metabolic role. So if once insulin is present, the hormone insulin from your beta cells, so all the sugar should be where? Inside the gas tanks, inside the storage tanks. They're not floating around. So then your blood glucose level should, over the next couple of hours, decline, right? To maintain this 90 milligrams per deciliter. Okay? Now, what happens when time passes? I didn't eat breakfast. It's now noon. When's the last time I ate was what, 12, maybe 10 hours ago, right? So my pancreas now senses the low blood sugar, right? Remember, it has to be a stimulus. It has to be a sensor, right? And then the pancreas will now activate the alpha cells to secrete glucagon. And what does glucagon do? Well, if it's only 10 hours, right? And this is where that intermittent fasting, that latest craze in dieting comes in. Because if you intermittent fast and keep your fasting to like 10 hours or 8 hours in between meals, it's going to force your liver to do what? Break down that extra glycogen and to release glucose and to keep your blood sugar at 90 milligrams per deciliter. Now, here's the bad thing about starving yourself. So let's say I'm like, oh man, it goes, if I'm burning all this glycogen, maybe I'll not eat the whole day. That is the stupidest thing if you know the system, right? But you can easily see how a layperson can think that way, right? It's not that they're stupid, they don't know how the body works. Well, this is what the body works when the stimulus blood glucose levels fall below 90 milligrams per deciliter for greater than 10 hours. The pancreas will still release alpha cells, it'll still tell the alpha cells to release glucagon, but now the glucagon will tell the liver to make ketones. Ketones are neurotoxic. That's why you are not you when you don't eat. That's why you get cranky, irritable, you get giddy, loss of concentration. either you're super hyper or super sleepy, right? Because your fuel is all now wrong, because now ketones are only released in a starvation state. That's why I do not like any ketogenic diet. It's promoting ketogenesis. It's promoting neurotoxicity. I don't like it, right? That's why Atkins 1 had to modify themselves for Atkins 2, because I told you guys the story. When I was a chemist going into medical school, and one of my colleagues go, "Did you read this?" And that was around the time when Atkins was, gaining traction with the general public, right? And I was like, "This is insane. This guy have an MD? He totally forgot this part of the lecture about ketones. I do not want to promote a ketogenic problem." Now, why? How do diabetics get into ketogenesis? Well, what's wrong with the diabetic? They either don't have insulin, or the insulin receptors on their liver and their cells don't work. So if that doesn't work, will the blood glucose level decline? No. So that's one problem. Your blood glucose, remember the glucose is 6-carbon sugar. It's really big, it's bulky. It's like a bull in a china shop. It's going to start ruining things, especially in the long term. And what else is the other problem? Your body will sense, it won't sense any sugar or fuel in the gas tank. It will sense that what? I'm hungry, I don't have any food. So what's going to happen? It's going to be long-term glucagon release to tell the liver to make ketones. So if the patient, even though they're eating, they have massive amounts of ketones, and then they get into something called diabetic ketoacidosis, which will make their blood very acidic, and it will promote a coma. And it doesn't take a lot. My last coma patient had only a blood glucose level of 220 milligrams per deciliter. That's not much. Heck, if I eat a Dave's double, I can easily put my sugar at 200. If I eat one of those Dave's double burgers from Wendy's, one of my favorite. So you could see how it's a what? It's a big circle, isn't it? Right? And now you fully know how diabetes works. All you have to do is take normal and do what? Mess with it. And now you'll forever remember the number 90 milligrams per deciliter, right? That is the normal fasting blood sugar for a normal adult person. But now you could see, like, so when they do the finger prick, if they're fasting and it's higher than that, then that's a problem. That's how I actually found out a couple of years ago that I was pre-diabetic. I was teaching a phlebotomy class, and we did the finger stick, and I didn't eat at all that morning. And it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and the last time I ate was 8 p.m. the night before, right? And my blood sugar was at 98. And then we took oral glucose tolerance test. I barely passed it, and it's at the level of diabetes. And another thing we also measure is for diabetics, and also for patients in general, there is a protein in the middle of all red blood cells called hemoglobin. Now, hemoglobin carries oxygen and carbon dioxide in and out of your body, right, into your lungs, so you can breathe out the carbon dioxide and then take in the oxygen, because that's the fuel. Well, another thing that this hemoglobin carries is sugar. And that's your glycosylated hemoglobin, or HB1AC. Maybe you've seen it on commercials. So if you have a lot of glucose riding on this protein, hemoglobin, on this red blood cell, I could tell you the status of your sugar intake for the last 6 to 9 months. So when you go to the doctor and you tell your doctor some BS, I've been dieting, I've been working out, right? Just be honest. If you haven't, you haven't, because guess what? I run an A1C, and I know exactly what you're doing. And you don't have to be obese to have an elevated A1C. My 14-year-old has an elevated A1C and has an abnormal fasting blood sugar. Why? He eats garbage all day, right? So now we have to adjust his diet, more vegetables, Now he has to eat oatmeal every morning with me, and he's 14 and he's thin as a rail. But what does science and what does our laboratories tell us? Okay, so that's the regulation of blood glucose. And I'm sure you could find a similar picture in your OpenStax. And I know for a fact there's a similar picture in there, but OpenStax is giving me trouble. So, and that's what's actually neat about open resource material. Like if you know where to look, you can find things. And actually that's my job, making sure you know where to look. So we talked about homeostasis, what it is. We talked about what the negative feedback loop is. So if you have a positive, right, to do something, you also have a negative to slow it down or to stop it, right? Because when we're already at balance, you don't want to mess with it anymore, right? So now let's look at the homeostatic regulation of the vascular system. So I can look at vascular system, and that's blood pressure. So let's look at homeostasis, blood pressure. Now, as you recall in previous, oh, here's a nice YouTube picture, but I want, where are you? Oh, here's this. I want like a similar picture to the one we were messing with. Now, blood pressure has different aspects. If you recall, this is not cooperating. If you recall what we were talking about in the lab when we were messing with the heart, blood pressure is made up of what gives us the blood pressure in our arteries? The fluid, right? So one aspect that we're going to control is the fluid, right? How much fluid goes in and out. And remember, I talked about wherever salt goes, water goes. So we have to not only maintain how much salt or how much water, right? I hate this. It's like false advertising. Well, it is a slide player though. It should be playing the slide, right? Let's go back to this. Okay. So, hey, this is a nice slide. Let's look through it. Now, of course, there's regulation of blood flow, and our blood pressure, as we learned in our dissection, is in the arteries. And of course, all control in your entire body is always nervous system and hormones. Okay? We already know that, right? And of course, it's part of your autonomic nervous system because you don't have any real control, right? You can sit there and try to meditate, but it's going to take a while, right? So, and we already know that arteries have a thick tunica media, right? And we also know that if anything blocks these arteries, there's going to be an increase in blood pressure. Increase in blood pressure is going to cause negative effects downstream to a whole bunch of organs. And we already talked about how if this gets blocked in our coronary arteries, how it leads to a heart attack, right? So blood flow, smooth muscle, we already know that. And of course, it goes any changes in metabolic activity, like how much sugar you have, and of course, hormones. Okay. Let's get right to hyperemia. No. I want to get to that picture. Nah, we already know that nerves control muscles. Okay. Let's talk about some of these hormones. Now, angiotensin 2, which are in your lungs, you know what? Instead of words, there's got to be a picture. No, that's confusing. You know what? I'm going to show you the RAA system. And that will make a little bit more sense regarding blood pressure. I don't like it. I was looking for their picture and wasn't going to give it to me. Where's my favorite RAA picture? Let me see. I have it for anatomy, physiology too. But oh, there it is. This is my favorite RAA picture because it talks about not only hormones, but it also talks about slide player again, messing with me. Okay. How do I don't want to sign up. Why always trying to make me do clickbait? All right, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make the picture bigger. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this picture bigger. Sorry. It's not being cooperative. Okay. I just want to move the picture just a little bit. Or you know what? I could take this, copy the image, and then put it. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. Put it right here. Okay. All right. So remember we talked about where there has to be some sort of stimulus, and then there's going to be some effector. So let's say we have low blood pressure, right? And let's look at the things that prescribe to blood pressure. So we have to talk about the water, right? So if I don't have a lot of water, what will happen to my blood pressure? It should decrease. If I don't have a lot of sodium, because remember, wherever salt goes, water goes, I should have also a decrease of blood volume, right? And then we're going to talk about all the hormones here. So this is the stimulus. I have a decrease in blood volume, and therefore decrease in blood pressure. So all of this goes together, right? Now, when that happens, the JG cells, or the juxtaglomerular cells of the kidneys, activate this hormone called renin. The liver releases angiotensinogen. If anytime you see the ogen like that, that means it's a precursor hormone. So the angiotensinogen then turns into angiotensin 1. And if you look at the name of the hormone, angio means vessel, tensin means what? To tense up. So remember, our ultimate goal is to increase our blood pressure. So the renin changes angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 changes into angiotensin 2 because of ACE, also known as angiotensin converting enzyme, right? So you could see the cascade of the different hormones that are involved. Once that happens, what will happen to the arteries? Because of angiotensin 2, the arteries now will have the signal to constrict. Therefore, your blood pressure will increase. Now, what else happens is that you'll also have an increase in aldosterone from your adrenal glands, which is the gland above your kidneys. And then what will happen? It goes increased sodium and water resorption. So if you have more sodium and more water in your system, what will happen? Increased blood volume, increased blood pressure. So if you look at this half, this is the hormonal part right here. This is the stimulus part right here. And this is the effector part, which is the increase in blood pressure. Now, knowing and understanding how your blood pressure increases, do you think we could figure out ways to decrease our blood pressure? Sure. One way, maybe you've heard of an ACE inhibitor, right? Mm-hmm. If I block this, you won't have blood pressure, right? And that's an ACE inhibitor. It's a very popular antihypertensive, because if I block this, this won't go to this. And then I'll have low blood pressure. What's another thing? I also have nerves, alpha and beta adrenergics, that signal the vasoconstriction to arterioles. How about if I block those? Then I won't have blood pressure. And that's your alpha blockers, and those are your beta blockers. And how about instead of increasing my sodium and water reabsorption, what if I told the kidneys, right, to throw out sodium and water? And isn't that a diuretic?
Mm-hmm.
That's what water pills do. So you could see here how medical science, how we know how blood pressure increases. So if I know how blood pressure increases, all I have to do is do what? Mess with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The examples: ACE inhibitor, alpha and beta blockers, and diuretics, which are three major categories. There are other categories when you go into pharmacology, but knowing this, when you get to the pharmacology portion of your training, you're like, oh, that's easy. Now I know mechanism of action. So it makes sense. ACE inhibitor, what's the most common problem with an ACE inhibitor? Chronic cough. And you don't have to memorize it because you know that angiotensin converting enzyme is where? It's in your lungs, right? And, oh, how about this? If I have a diuretic, what's the problem? I'm messing with your sodium and water. What else is going to mess with? Your potassium and your hydrogen ion. That means you're going to have acid-base problems. And also you might have heart problems, because we know that potassium tells our heart to recharge and reset. And if I'm messing with potassium, right? So when you look at this chart, and this is also the reason why, excuse me, the course asks you to do concept maps, because don't you think this is much easier to memorize and to remember than a bunch of slides, or even worse, a paragraph in a textbook? So
Right.
now you have a visual representation. In my head, when I work up a hypertensive patient, this chart is in my head, and how I deal with my hypertensive patient. And if you know your basic science, it makes your life a whole lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you could see now all we're doing is going down the list. We already talked about glucose. We already talked about also fluid homeostasis a little bit, right? We
Mm-hmm.
already also talked about, because fluid homeostasis definitely relates to blood pressure, right? And temperature homeostasis was the first thing we talked about. So we went through all of these things: regulation, also the regulation of the vascular system. Exercise and homeostasis. Let's talk about that. Let's look at exercise physiology. One of my favorite things, because I'm telling you, working out is really, really boring. But if the key thing that you always have to understand about exercise, it's required. Your body needs to move around, and especially with the way the world works and all the technology. I'll be sitting down at this laptop all day until 4:30 today. All right, so I have to go do something physical later. So let's look at what happens to your body when you exercise. So of course, what's our stimulus? Okay, increased muscle contraction. Therefore, the cell will have increased respiration. And remember the definition of respiration? It's what? The intake of oxygen and then the release of carbon dioxide. Now, why are we taking in the oxygen and why are we expending glucose? Is because I need to create ATP in the mitochondria, and I use that ATP for muscle contraction, which we already learned about. So we already know this connection. Yes? Increase
Yes.
muscle contraction. And that's why when you increase muscle contraction, you're going to need more oxygen. So what's going to happen? What do you need? You need to breathe. So what's going to happen to your respiratory rate? It's going to go up, because I need to increase my oxygen to feed this production line right up here. I'm also going to have increased carbon dioxide, because I need to expel CO2, right? And of course, if I'm moving around and there's all these chemical reactions going on, what's going to happen? I'm going to start to heat up. And if I start to heat up, of course, I'm going to sweat. Okay. Now, there's a whole bunch of jokers in this gym. Well, my gym. There's this dude who's wearing like, I don't know, like a parka. I don't know. He was like a winter jacket while he was running. Now, that's not going to burn fat. That's just going to make you what? Hot, right? What burns fat? What we saw here, increased muscle contraction. So if your workout isn't doing it for you, or you hit a plateau in your workout, you know, where your workouts aren't, you know, going any better, what do? You up the game. Like a classic example is most people run on a treadmill anywhere from like 0% incline or 1% incline. How about 5? Try 5. It's murder, right? I do my sprints at 5 to 6% incline, and just a little tiny sprint, like 20 seconds, it will burn way more muscle and goes burn increased cellular respiration. And what will it do? Oh, I'll sweat to death, right? I don't need to wear a parka, because wearing a parka, wearing like heavier clothing will just make you sweat. Now, increased CO2, what's going to happen? I'm going to breathe more. My heart rate's going to go up. And what's going to happen to my arteries? There's going to be vasodilatation, right? So this is part of the wonders of exercise. How cool exercise is because if you're constantly, like every day or every other day, opening up these blood vessels, what will it do? It will make your blood vessels more compliant. You know, it's like when you warm up a balloon, right? You can't just blow it up, but if you stretch it a couple of times, what happens to the balloon? It becomes more compliant. And if a balloon is more compliant, what happens to your blood pressure? It goes down. That's why, even though I'm a good 50 pounds overweight, why do I have no blood pressure meds? Why is my cholesterol down? Because what do? 6 days out of 7, I burn for at least 30 minutes at my maximum heart rate. And if you want to know your maximum heart rate, you take the number 220, you minus your age, and then you multiply that by 0.80. And whatever number you get, that's the heart rate that you have to maintain. That heart rate and above. That's why you see the more serious runners wear a heart monitor, so they know that they're maximizing their workout. Many moons ago, I used to wear a heart monitor. Now, I'm barely hanging on at 15, 20 minutes into the treadmill. So I already know I'm burning. But eventually, hopefully, if I drop some of this weight, I'll be back to wearing the heart monitor and back to doing what I need to do. But you can now see your body will now start to react. And if you have increased CO2 production, if you're not breathing properly, what's going to happen? You're going to have increased acidosis, and that's where you get those muscle cramping, right? You ever see guys and gals who work out and they don't breathe? That's a good way to faint, right? You ever see them when they're trying to lift more than they can handle, and then they make a face and they're not breathing? Actually, when you're weightlifting, you should be breathing. And weightlifting also could be a cardiovascular exercise if you don't wait very long in between sets. I see people talk, hang out, and just for giggles, I just count how long it takes for them to get back onto the machine or back onto the, to the bench or to the dumbbells. Because of my son, 30 seconds. And there's an app for that too. You could set a boxing timer to remind you, like every time you get off that weight, you should get what? Right back on it, right? And do you have to press large amounts of weights? No. I challenge anybody to take, just the dumbbell bar, just the empty bar, which is only 45 pounds, bench that 100 times. Do 5 sets of 20. By the 5th set, your arms are going to be nothing. And what will happen? You're going to have a little bit of pain, because why? A little bit of acidosis. You're going to have increased muscle contraction with some breakdown of muscle. But then what happens when the muscle repairs itself? It becomes stronger, right? So, that's why little by little, I'm getting my strength back. I'm in my 50s and I bench more than most 20-year-olds. Not because I'm strong. Look at my frame. I'm 5 foot nothing. It's because what? You keep on training daily, what will happen? You will get stronger, and your body will then change its set point. Once your body changes its set point, it's going to like to stay there. You know what I'm saying? And that's why all the management you have for your patient, especially lifestyle changes, should be subtle. And again, physiologic weight loss is no more than 1 to 1.2 pounds per week. Any greater weight loss per week is non-physiologic for your patient. All right? So that is exercise homeostasis. And let's look at what else we were supposed to do. We did temperature fluid, we did everything. Let's look at other stuff for this week. But now you see why, well, I could see now why they put it at the end. So like, you know, maybe some of the stuff that I'm explaining, we already kind of looked at before. But me personally, I like to talk about homeostasis in the beginning. And a lot of other textbooks, they like talking about homeostasis in the beginning. Now, discussion 8. Thank you. I already saw your discussion. But just as a note for everybody else, please, I'm not naming names, but you will know if I sent you a message. Plagiarism, unfortunately, now that we're all online, is rampant. And I know the majority of you is either out of lack of discipline, and I know you don't really mean to just copy and paste, or maybe you're under the gun. Please do not do that. Especially those of you who are interested to go to nursing, please do not do that. Just honesty. I would rather have you give me 100 words, but they're your words, instead of giving me 900 words that are cut and paste from somewhere. Okay. And recently I haven't really been checking because I don't know your writing style, but I did random checks the other day. I found 4 people in 3 different classes. So please, this is a message to everybody, everybody who's watching this video. Please, in your own words, all your discussions, okay? And if you're not good at writing, that's great. Come see me for tutoring. It goes, because isn't that what you paid for? To fix all the things you're not good at. So with to diabetes, it's not the new epidemic. It's been around forever. I don't know who wrote this, right? It goes, now, I need for you to define what epidemic is. I need for you to define type 2 diabetes with respect to what we were talking about, right? And on our lecture is definitely apropos. And it goes, what does it mean? And how's this? Why don't you talk about it? What does it mean financially? I remember a couple of years ago, the National Kidney Association. I'm a big supporter of it, and also I'm also one of their, I don't know, they call them platinum members, people who give like a ton of money to, because my father died of kidney complications secondary to diabetes, and he died hard. And I do not wish that upon my worst enemy. I don't have enemies, but I always say that line. Right? NKA put out an article on how if you want to go into medical business, diabetes accessories is the way to go, because the revenue a couple of years back was in the billions with a B, and it's something that can be preventable. Almost all the Garais males are not only heart attack patients, more than half of them are diabetic. Now, I'm pre-diabetic, but you know what? My goal is to be pre-diabetic the rest of my life. My mother was pre-diabetic for almost 20 years. And it's only recently she's full diabetic, and she's what, 75, 76 years old? And she doesn't take any meds for her diabetes. It's just she does regular exercise and diet control, portion control. She watches what she eats. She watches every calorie, because she knows excess calories, excess intake of glucose is going to be floating around in my body, right? And I've been trying intermittent fasting lately. It's hard, but yeah, it kind of works. And again, the concept of smaller meals versus larger meals, right? Because especially those of us in the healthcare field, what do? We don't eat all day, or eat garbage during the day. And then at night, when we come home at like 10, 11 o'clock at night, we eat these huge meals and then go right to sleep. That's not a good idea, right? But little meals during the course of the day is beneficial, and it provides time for your gastrointestinal tract to do what? Process the food, and then it supplies a nice steady state of glucose. And remember, the cutoff is 90 milligrams per deciliter. So please, 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 when you look, when you do your discussions, and if you haven't had any recent comments from me, that means you're either doing fine, but just ask me. Maybe I forgot to comment. Now, the lesson 8, I think the lesson 8 is this. I'm gonna, there's more videos here. Lesson 8, I think this is the one, yeah. Let me check if it's the one. Yeah, I don't like this one. It's where you just go through it. But you know what? Lesson 8 is on me, ladies and gents. You don't have a lesson 8 for this week. So take a breather. No lesson for this week. So what's due next week? Task 8, discussion 8. By week 9 next week will be our last lecture. And I believe your final is located on, is it lesson 9? Yes, lesson 9, and it's an online final right here. Okay? So I believe you have access to that starting Monday of next week. Okay, any comments, questions, or recipe?
The only question I would have is, when is the final exam actually due?
The final exam is actually due the Saturday of week 10. So
Okay.
I don't know what that date is. Let me look up that date so that everybody on here will be. So this is week 8 currently. The week of the 20th is a week 9. So it will be due, probably grades are due August 1. So by 12 noon, if I don't see anything in there, I'm very sorry, right? But I'm gonna start checking around like the 29th and 30th, and I'll see, because there's some people might have some issues with their online or whatever. But my advice is to do it like during week 9, you know, and then week 10 would be for any remediation and or any last minute registration stuff. And if you didn't register for classes yet, please, please, please register. I'll probably be giving a call out for the people who didn't register probably this weekend, because I'm here also this weekend. Okay. That's it. I guess I'm also going to put the thing for extra credit for the laboratory in the announcements right now on what you could do instead of the laboratory. Okay.
All right, we're going to be able to see this video later, right?
Yeah, probably within, if my internet is cooperating with me, probably within the hour. And if it's not cooperating with me, it'll be up by this afternoon.
All right, thank you so much, sir. You have a nice afternoon.
You know, bye.